This phenomenon has been documented in forensic psychology literature, where specific auditory cues can trigger deeply embedded memories. Investigators noted that the nursery rhyme in question is one of the most universally recognized in many cultures. The repetition of identical phrases across unrelated cases presents a statistical anomaly that challenges typical investigative assumptions. Criminal profiling experts sometimes encounter verbal signatures, repeated phrases or themes, though usually within a single offender's pattern. What makes these cases unusual is that the phrase originates from the victims, not the perpetrators. Across different jurisdictions and time periods, researchers have studied how extreme stress can activate primitive memory circuits, potentially accessing childhood memorization. The consistency of this detail across otherwise dissimilar cases prompted re-examination of witness reliability protocols. This pattern raises questions about whether investigators might unconsciously seek familiar narratives in chaotic evidence. This pattern emerges across jurisdictions with different legal systems and investigative protocols. The time span involved suggests this is not a contemporary phenomenon, but a recurring one. Similar patterns have been observed in other types of criminal investigations, though with different underlying causes. The lack of a common perpetrator indicates this may relate to environmental or situational factors rather than individual intent. Forensic science has advanced significantly over the periods these cases span, yet the pattern persists. This raises questions about whether certain social or structural conditions can generate similar outcomes independently. Investigators noted that victims consistently recited a specific verse from a well-known children's rhyme immediately before their deaths. This pattern was documented across multiple cases through witness statements, audio recordings, and in one instance, a written note left by a victim. The repetition of this specific verse became a consistent data point that linked otherwise separate incidents. Psychological analysis suggests such repetition could indicate a state of extreme stress or dissociation in the moments before death. From an investigative standpoint, this pattern provided a rare behavioral signature that helped connect cases that might otherwise have remained isolated. The focus remains on understanding the psychological mechanisms behind this repetition, rather than the graphic details of the crimes. This phenomenon shares similarities with other documented cases where specific phrases or behaviors recur in traumatic situations. The consistency of this element across different victims and circumstances makes it a significant, though puzzling, investigative finding. The nursery rhyme in question is among the most widely recognized in the English language, typically encountered during early childhood education. Its structure follows a cyclical pattern, often involving repetitive actions or sequences that return to a starting point. The surface themes are generally considered simple and harmless, focusing on everyday activities or natural cycles. This apparent innocence is what makes its widespread presence and memorization notable across generations. The rhyme's simplicity allows for easy oral transmission, contributing to its persistence in cultural memory. Many such rhymes serve mnemonic or educational purposes, helping develop language rhythm and memory in young learners. Comparative analysis shows similar cyclical structures appear in folk traditions worldwide, often used to teach basic concepts. This universality suggests the rhyme taps into fundamental cognitive patterns related to repetition and predictability. The phrase was consistently delivered with clarity in each documented instance. Audio recordings confirm the words were spoken at normal conversational volume. This distinguishes it from background noise or unintelligible speech patterns. The delivery remained consistent across different recording devices and environments. This pattern suggests intentional communication rather than accidental capture. The audible quality allowed for precise transcription and analysis. Clear delivery is a key factor in distinguishing credible audio evidence from ambiguous sounds. This characteristic appears in documented cases where communication was intended to be understood. The evidence was verified by investigators, eliminating the possibility of misinterpretation. This verification process followed standard investigative protocols to ensure accuracy. Third, analysis examined the victim-perpetrator dynamic. Investigators found no prior relationship between the victim and attacker that would explain the shared reference. This absence of connection is significant in criminal investigations, as prior relationships often provide motive. The shared reference therefore becomes more puzzling without this explanatory context. Such cases where victim and perpetrator have no established connection present particular investigative challenges. The verification of evidence and analysis of relationships form crucial steps in understanding these complex situations. The phrase was spoken at the precise moment of confrontation, marking the victim's final known communication. This timing places the utterance at the critical juncture when the situation escalated to its most dangerous point. In investigative contexts, final statements often carry significant weight for understanding events. The content of last communications can provide insight into the victim's state of mind during the incident. Forensic analysis sometimes examines such utterances for patterns in high-stress situations. This aligns with documented cases where final words become key pieces of evidence in investigations. This detail represented an investigative dead end, as it did not point toward a specific person or location. Instead, it offered insight into a psychological state, which is common in complex investigations where physical evidence is limited. Investigators often encounter such psychological indicators when traditional forensic methods reach their limits. These details can reveal patterns of behavior or decision-making under extreme circumstances. While flagged as highly unusual, such psychological evidence requires different analytical approaches than physical clues. This shift from tangible evidence to psychological analysis marks a challenging phase in many investigations. The phenomenon of terminal linguistic automatism occurs when the brain's higher cognitive functions begin to fail under extreme duress. In such states, the mind may revert to accessing its most deeply ingrained and earliest memories for processing. Nursery rhymes and childhood songs are common examples of this type of foundational memory. This psychological mechanism is not a conscious choice made by the individual in crisis. Instead, it represents an involuntary neurological response as the brain's executive functions shut down. The critical point is the distinction between a deliberate act and an automatic, trauma-induced process. This pattern has been observed in various documented cases of extreme physical and psychological stress. Understanding this mechanism helps separate factual neurological processes from speculative interpretations of events. A major misconception is that this implies a coordinated killer, or a curse. Law enforcement analysts have found no forensic or circumstantial links between the perpetrators of these crimes. The connection exists solely in the victim's final moments. This pattern resembles what statisticians call a coincidence cluster. Events that appear related due to timing, not causation. We also cannot know if the pattern is as rare as it seems. Similar phenomena occur in other fields, like medical diagnoses or financial markets, where random events sometimes form apparent patterns. Without evidence of coordination, each incident must be investigated as an independent event. This analytical approach prevents investigators from being misled by superficial similarities. This pattern of final utterances may represent only documented instances where witnesses were present and reports were made. Many cases likely exist where last words went unrecorded or unrecognized as part of a broader pattern. The documented cluster provides a visible sample of what could be a more widespread psychological phenomenon. This phenomenon remains poorly understood, despite these documented patterns emerging from confirmed cases. The practical insight applies primarily to investigators analyzing evidence and psychologists studying human behavior under extreme stress. Understanding these patterns could help professionals recognize similar indicators in future investigations. This pattern forces investigators to shift their focus from external evidence to the victim's internal psychological state during their final moments. It becomes a data point about extreme stress response, rather than a clue about the offender's signature or methodology. This approach is grounded in established psychological research about human behavior under extreme duress. Similar patterns have been documented in various high-stress survival situations, from wilderness emergencies to hostage scenarios. For investigators, this represents a shift from looking for what was done to the victim to understanding what was happening within the victim. The human mind, under extreme stress, can exhibit predictable, measurable responses that provide crucial context. For the rest of us, this underscores a sobering reality about human psychology when facing mortal danger. These psychological mechanisms operate on a continuum, from everyday stress responses to extreme survival situations. Cognitive psychology suggests early memories create neural pathways that remain accessible throughout life. During extreme stress, the brain may activate these preserved childhood patterns as a coping mechanism. This phenomenon has been documented in survival situations where individuals recall nursery rhymes or songs. The pattern represents a retreat to cognitive simplicity when complex problem-solving fails. Similar behavioral patterns appear across different crisis scenarios, from natural disasters to survival situations. Researchers study these patterns to understand human resilience and cognitive function under extreme pressure. The focus is on understanding predictable human responses rather than supernatural explanations. These documented patterns provide insight into how the human mind preserves and accesses foundational memories. This observation highlights a fundamental cognitive process during traumatic events. When confronted with sudden, inexplicable violence, the mind instinctively searches for recognizable patterns. This pattern-seeking behavior is a documented psychological survival mechanism. The brain attempts to fit chaotic events into pre-existing narrative frameworks, even when they don't logically align. This phenomenon occurs across various documented cases of sudden trauma and unexplained incidents. The need for narrative coherence persists until consciousness fades, regardless of how ill-fitting the story may be.